Hello again, and welcome to Broadcasting Scotland. It's Friday the 24th of March. I'm Andrew Wilson, and this is Scotland at 7. This evening I have the latest daily update from Ukraine on day 394 of the illegal Russian war of aggression and imperial ambition, and then I will bring you today's headlines from Scotland and around the world. The International Committee of the Red Cross has said that about 10,000 civilians, many of them elderly and with disabilities, are living in very dire conditions in and around the besieged city of Bakhmut in eastern Ukraine. More than 90% of Bakhmut's residents have fled, and much of the city has been destroyed in the longest and bloodiest battle of Russia's war. However, several thousand civilians are estimated to remain in the city itself, said the ICRC's Umar Khan in a video briefing from Dnipro. The overnight death toll in Kostiantynivka has risen to 5. 3 women and 2 men were killed in an attack which hit one of Ukraine's invincibility points. Those are humanitarian support centres where residents can charge their phones and generators and access other services. Emergency services reported that rubble is being dismantled after a night shelling on Bilopilia in the Sumy region, during which it is claimed Russian planes dropped several bombs on the city. One of them hit the police building, and a local school was also damaged. A policeman and a school guard were killed. 9 other people were injured. The bodies of 83 Ukrainian soldiers killed fighting in the war have been returned from the Russian side, according to a Ukrainian official. The security situation around the southern city of Mykolaiv will have to improve before its ports can be included in a deal that will allow the safe export of Ukrainian grain, a senior Ukrainian official said earlier today. Russia's defense ministry also said today that the use of depleted uranium shells in Ukraine would harm Ukrainian troops, the wider population, and negatively affect the country's agriculture sector. Estonia's foreign ministry said earlier today it has decided to expel one Russian diplomat who was working at Moscow's embassy in Tallinn. The US Treasury has announced a new tranche of sanctions being imposed on 3 entities and 9 individuals from Belarus, including the leader Alexander Lukashenko's Boeing 737 luxury aircraft. Vladimir Zelensky renewed his call for more long-range weapons from Western allies yesterday. Speaking to an EU summit via a video link, the Ukrainian president recounted the devastating scenes he had witnessed close to the front lines where fighting has been fiercest. The EU leaders endorsed a plan, agreed by foreign ministers on Monday, to send 1 million artillery shells to Ukraine over the coming year. President Zelensky also visited the southern region of Kherson, where he toured local infrastructure and promised to rebuild following Russia's invasion. The General Staff of Ukraine's military said Russian forces have left the Kherson town of Novokakhovka, but a Russian-installed official in the region denied those claims. The EU Commission President Ursula von der Leyen said that the EU would work to find the 16,200 Ukrainian children who have been deported to Russia. Calling it a reminder of the darkest times in our history, she said only 300 children have so far been returned. Dmitry Medvedev, the Deputy Secretary of Russia's Security Council, said Moscow's relations with the West have hit an all-time low. Asked whether the threat of nuclear conflict had eased, he said, "No, it hasn't decreased, it has grown. Every day when they provide Ukraine with foreign weapons brings the nuclear apocalypse closer." Medvedev also said that any attempt to arrest Vladimir Putin would amount to a declaration of war against Russia. Hungary would not arrest Putin if he entered the country, Prime Minister Viktor Orban's chief of staff said yesterday. And Finland's president, Sauli Niinisto, signed legislation yesterday to make his country part of the North Atlantic Treaty Organization, NATO. Last year, Finland sought to join the military alliance in response to Russia's war in Ukraine, and legislation incorporating NATO's founding treaties was passed in the parliament in Helsinki on the 1st of March. Nicola Sturgeon has carried out her final official engagement as Scotland's First Minister, opening a £33 million treatment centre for orthopaedic surgery. Fife National Treatment Centre, NTC, will provide additional capacity for more than 700 orthopaedic procedures a year, including hip and knee surgery by 2026. The new facility at Victoria Hospital in Kirkcaldy includes an orthopaedic outpatients department, 3 surgical theatres, and a ward and a short-stay unit. It is intended to help to address the backlog of planned care which was exacerbated by the COVID-19 pandemic. Ms Sturgeon opened the facility today, with further centres due to open later this year in NHS Highland, NHS Forth Valley, and at the Golden Jubilee Hospital in Glasgow. It was her final act as First Minister. She said, "Our National Treatment Centre programme is a significant investment in frontline planned care infrastructure and is a crucial part of our NHS recovery plan. We are determined to ensure people receive the treatment they need as soon as possible. So I am pleased to officially open the Fife Centre, which will give people across the country faster access to life-changing orthopaedic surgery. The additional capacity provided through this new state-of-the-art facility will also help to cut the backlog of planned care that was worsened by the global pandemic. With 3 further NTCs opening this year, I'm confident this programme will be a significant boost to the NHS as it recovers from COVID. The NHS Fife Board Chairwoman Tricia Marwick said, "We are delighted that the new National Treatment Centre in Fife has now opened its doors to patients. The new purpose-built facility is the culmination of many years of work, and to see patients now being seen and treated in such new state-of-the-art environment is fantastic. To see the project delivered successfully and on budget, particularly given the additional challenges of building during a pandemic, is a credit to all involved. We are fortunate here in Fife to have an incredibly forward-thinking and innovative orthopaedic team, and this new facility will support them to deliver the very highest standards of care for patients." The UK government has cut almost £6 million in funding to a programme in Afghanistan supporting vulnerable women and girls. Save the Children said it has been told by the Foreign, Commonwealth and Development Office that it will receive just over £1 million of a promised £7 million to support more than 100,000 people to access essential basic services such as healthcare and education. The charity said the year-long programme, which started in December and delivers classes to women and girls across Afghanistan, may now be forced to close this month. Save the Children is scrambling to secure funds to continue the work, which provides a lifeline for many who face the risk of early marriage, violence and other forms of exploitation. Gwen Hines, the Chief Executive of Save the Children UK, said Afghan children are already dying from hunger and disease and now face having funding for basic food, health and education programmes withdrawn by the British government. The decision to cut millions in funding to Afghan children sends a stark message to the world that the UK is turning its back on the most vulnerable children and families in one of the world's most challenging contexts. The UK's rhetoric that it supports women and girls in Afghanistan now rings hollow. More than 28 million people, more than half the population, including 15 million children, are in need of humanitarian assistance in Afghanistan, according to the UN. But since 2019, the total UK aid budget has been cut by £4 billion, from 0.7% of gross national income to 0.5% in 2021. As much as a third of the aid budget is now being spent on housing refugees in the UK, which MPs on the International Development Committee have described as unsustainable. That committee has launched a parliamentary inquiry into the impact of the government's funding cuts on women and girls in low-income countries. To cut the Save the Children's programme, supporting Afghanistan's basic services, comes 3 months after the Taliban issued a decree banning Afghan women from working with NGOs. The charity was among a number of organisations that suspended operations as a result. It has resumed its work after receiving assurances from the Afghan authorities that female staff will be safe and can work without obstruction. Just 1% of the £1.1 billion estimated to have been lost to fraud and error through the UK's COVID-19 business grant schemes has been recovered by the government, according to the public spending watchdog. In a report published yesterday, the National Audit Office said ministers had paid out £22.6 billion in grants to businesses during the pandemic to keep them afloat in 8 separate schemes over 2 years from March 2020. It added that more than £1.1 billion had been lost to fraud and erroneous payments, and that by mid-February 2023, only £11 million of losses had been recovered by the new Department for Business and Trade. Dame Meg Hillier, the Labour chair of the House of Commons Public Accounts Committee, which also assesses state spending, said the government had moved at speed to help businesses at the onset of the pandemic, but she called on the government to act on the lessons from this experience it has learnt so it can be on the front foot for the next crisis. The NAO said in its report that most of the £1.1 billion had been lost in the early phases of the schemes at a time of significant practical challenges as councils scrambled to understand scheme requirements and answer questions from businesses. Under the terms of the schemes, local authorities were required to pursue losses from fraud and payments made in error before returning them to central government, a process, according to the NAO, that gave local authorities no financial incentive to identify losses. Early schemes lost significant sums to error and fraud, but the Business Department addressed this in later iterations, said Gareth Davis, the head of the National Audit Office. The government does not yet know the impact of these grants in terms of maintaining jobs or how much support might have been given to businesses which did not need it. Without such assessment, an overall judgment about the value for money of the schemes remains open. The Department for Business and Trade said the NAO's report confirms that our COVID-19 business grant schemes helped to secure millions of businesses and livelihoods through the pandemic. It said no amount of error and fraud is acceptable, and we are continuing to work hard to recover these funds where possible. James Cleverly, the Foreign Secretary, and Maros Sefcovic, the European Commission Vice President, have, on behalf of the UK and the EU, formally adopted the Windsor Framework, the revised version of the Northern Ireland Protocol. In a joint statement, Cleverly and Sefcovic said that they met this morning in a constructive atmosphere building on the excellent cooperation between them both in recent months. They said they would work together intensively and faithfully to implement the Windsor Framework. And they also proposed further post-Brexit cooperation on other issues, including energy, trade and security. In their statement, they set out some of the details. On energy, they underlined the importance of collaboration over the past year as Europe decouples from Russian fossil fuels and highlighted the importance of dialogue and security of energy supply. They confirmed their commitment to progress work on the electricity trading arrangements envisaged in the Trade and Cooperation Agreement. They also discussed the EU Green Deal industrial plan. On trade, they looked forward to the signing of a Memorandum of Understanding on financial services and on intellectual property soon. They agreed to finalise preparation for the working groups in the areas of technical barriers to trade as a matter of priority. They also discussed the UK retained EU Law Bill and the Bill of Rights Bill. And on security, they noted the close collaboration in support of Ukraine and looked forward to dialogue provided for under the Trade and Cooperation Agreement in the areas of cybersecurity and counter-terrorism. They also discussed the implementation of data protection safeguards for the passenger name records. The passage into law of one of the central components of the Windsor Framework, with comparatively little fuss, lets still more air out of the overpumped tyres of Brexit and leaves Boris Johnson, whose career has been defined by opposition to Brussels, adrift from his leadership, his party, and from the wider country too. There is very little appetite for his return, said Gemma Connor of the polling firm YouGov, pointing to surveys from October, which showed that 72% of people thought Johnson should not come back as Tory party leader, and that includes a majority of Conservative voters. She pointed out that the survey was conducted at a time of huge discontent with Truss as Prime Minister, when a Johnson revival might have seemed more appetising. Since then, Rishi Sunak has proved himself more popular, at least in England, and so it's likely that what little appetite there was for a Boris return has diminished further. It seems that the old electoral magic, once Johnson's central appeal to Tory MPs, has evaporated. Rob Semple, a former chair of the powerful National Conservative Convention of Local Association Leaders, said it was time for the Conservatives to move on. Reports that Johnson's supporters have been briefing against rising star Kemi Badenoch, the current business secretary, highly rated by the right wing of the party in last summer's leadership contest, suggest that Johnson's not ready to surrender his mantle of the king over the water just yet. As one senior Conservative councillor put it, you can't write Boris off, ever, until he's in his grave. You could say that this week just made Johnson's resurrection a little more unlikely. It's also worth remembering that the Democratic Unionist Party voted against the government in this week's first parliamentary vote on the new Windsor Framework Brexit deal. Party officers had met on Monday and made a unanimous decision to reject Rishi Sunak's revised plan for the post-Brexit trade arrangements in Northern Ireland, the DUP leader Sir Geoffrey Donaldson said in a statement. It does not deal with some of the fundamental problems at the heart of our current difficulties. There remain key areas of concern which require further clarification, reworking and change, as well as seeing further legal text, Donaldson said. His statements all but extinguished any lingering hope that the Stormont institution could be revived in time for the 25th anniversary of the Good Friday Agreement on the 10th of April. US President Joe Biden and Bill and Hillary Clinton are expected to be amongst the dignitaries who are to visit Northern Ireland next month to mark the anniversary of the groundbreaking peace agreement. More than 55,000 objections have been put in against controversial proposals to build a resort on the banks of Loch Lomond, the Scottish Greens have said. It comes after revised plans for the major tourism destination on the southern shores of the famous loch were lodged after concerns were expressed about the previous proposal. In 2019, the company behind the proposed Lomond Banks development in Balloch, that's theme park company Flamingo Land, withdrew its initial proposal after more than 60,000 people signed a petition, calling for it to be scrapped. The Green MSP Ross Greer said that the plans could be beaten back for good this time around. Officials at the Loch Lomond and Trossachs National Park Authority have recommended that the plans, which are also opposed by the National Trust for Scotland, the Woodland Trust and Ramblers Scotland, be abandoned. Greer said, "I am grateful to everyone who has supported our community campaign. Every objection matters and helps to show the scale of local and national opposition to this garish, unwelcome and destructive development. It would be an environmental disaster and an act of cultural vandalism against one of Scotland's most beautiful and iconic landscapes. It would mean extra traffic and congestion on local roads which are already struggling to cope and would only stand to benefit wealthy tourists, not the community or existing local businesses. Loch Lomond means so much more to so many people. It must not be treated as a playground for developers looking for a quick profit. We've beaten Flamingo Land before, and with tens of thousands of objections, this time we'll do it for good." In 1973, Liam Holden was convicted of murdering a British soldier in Northern Ireland and became the last person in the United Kingdom to be sentenced to hang. Earlier today, half a century after the sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, 11 years after the sentence was quashed and a year after Holden died, a High Court in Belfast awarded £350,000 to his estate. The court accepted that the army waterboarded and tortured Holden into confessing to shooting Frank Bell, an 18-year-old member of the Parachute Regiment. The posthumous award included damages for inhumane and degrading treatment, misfeasance in public office, and malicious prosecution. Holden died last September, aged 68, after campaigning for decades to clear his name. The damages case was brought against the Ministry of Defence. His son Samuel told BBC Radio that the family was sad and relieved. "My father is not here to see this finished, to see it done. It was a long, long journey for him, a long road. He went through an awful lot to get here. What he went through should never have happened. Today it's all clear that he was innocent." The Pat Finucane Centre tweeted, "Sadly, he passed away before this vindication." The Troubles were at their height in 1973, when soldiers detained Holden on suspicion that he was a sniper who had shot Bell in Ballymurphy in West Belfast. A jury convicted Holden after a 4-day trial. The judge told him, "You will suffer death in the manner authorised in law." Shortly after his sentence was commuted to life imprisonment, capital punishment was finally abolished in Northern Ireland, aligning it with the rest of the UK. Holden served 17 years in jail. In 2012, the Court of Appeal quashed his conviction after hearing that Holden had signed a confession after being taken to an army base near to the scene of the shooting and subjected to waterboarding and death threats. Inquiries by the Criminal Cases Review Commission discovered evidence that the Army's practice of detaining and questioning suspects at the time was unlawful. Holden was awarded £1 million for losses suffered due to the miscarriage of justice. The Scottish Government will earn more than £260 million after agreeing to lease areas of its seabed to floating offshore wind projects that can power oil and gas rigs. In a world first, Crown Estate Scotland gave the green light for companies to help trim the North Sea's carbon emissions by developing floating wind farms that can directly supply oil and gas platforms with renewable electricity. 8 companies, which include the UK-listed oil firm Harbour Energy and the investment unit of oil company BP, will pay a total of almost £262 million in applicant fees once the agreements are finalised next year, in return for the chance to build 13 offshore wind projects totalling 5.5 gigawatts. The leases were awarded to 8 full-scale wind farm projects that plan to supply electricity directly to oil and gas platforms, as well as 5 small-scale wind power projects that will provide test beds for innovative new technologies that are not yet ready to be rolled out at scale. The Crown Estate expects to rake in further revenues for the Scottish Government from rent payments once the wind farms begin operating for lifetimes, which could stretch to between 25 and 50 years. The North Sea oil industry is under pressure to cut its carbon emissions as the UK Government continues to defy the anger of environmentalists by approving new oil and gas projects despite legally binding climate targets. The Climate Change Committee, which advises the government on climate issues, has said that UK carbon budgets can still be met if new UK fields are developed, provided that additional actions are taken to reduce emissions, such as electrifying offshore platforms with renewable energy. However, there is also a wider question whether developing new UK fields will help or hinder efforts to reduce emissions globally, said the Climate Change Committee's Chief Executive Chris Stark in a letter to the government last year. Oil companies are turning to floating offshore wind technology to replace the gas and diesel generators that usually power their rigs, because these turbines can generate electricity even in very deep areas of the UK continental shelf where traditional wind farms cannot be built. Colin Palmer, a director at Crown Estate Scotland, said this leasing round would help to reduce North Sea carbon emissions, generate revenues for the Scottish Government, and encourage innovation in the offshore renewables market. Brian McFarlane, an industry co-chair of the Scottish Offshore Wind Energy Council, added that by using Scottish deep-sea expertise built up over many years, this would give the industry the opportunity to show the world how to successfully build and operate floating offshore wind. Seafood businesses and marine organisations in Scotland's coastal communities are set to benefit from a new year of funding through Marine Fund Scotland. A total of up to £14 million of funding will be available in 2023-24 to encourage the sustainable use of marine resources for economic growth, support livelihoods and jobs, whilst preserving the health of marine and coastal ecosystems. Applications for funding can be submitted via a new web portal which will be live from 10 a.m. on the 11th of April. Marine Fund Scotland was established following the UK's exit from the EU and replaces funding for the fishing and seafood sector previously available through the European Maritime and Fisheries Fund. The 2023-24 Marine Fund Scotland delivers on the Scottish Government's Blue Economy Vision, which was published in 2022. In the past, projects benefiting from the fund included modernisation of salmon and trout processing facilities in order to reduce their energy and water use, the installation of solar panels at a seafood cold store to cut back on its carbon footprint, and process capacity building for a shellfish producer to meet the growing demand from premium markets in the US and Asia. Our Rural Affairs Secretary, Vari Gudjon, said, Marine Fund Scotland has been crucial in supporting marine businesses and projects over the past 2 years. I look forward to many more exciting and innovative initiatives benefiting from it over this coming year. Our seas and coasts support vital jobs across our economy, especially in coastal and island communities. The last few years have been incredibly challenging for the sector, with Brexit, the pandemic, and the cost of living crisis all having an impact. This fund continues to be key in supporting the sustainable development of Scotland's blue economy and will play an important role in enabling our marine and fisheries businesses to grow. Donna Fordyce, the Chief Executive of Seafood Scotland, said, the Marine Fund Scotland has been crucial in the promotion of Scottish seafood in both developing new markets for the premium seafood we produce, but also in retaining existing markets. This is particularly so given the impacts of the last few years with Brexit and the pandemic. We are now in the midst of a cost of living crisis, which requires continuing effort to ensure the quality and affordability of Scottish seafood is recognised. Wildcats are to be released in the Cairngorms National Park this summer after a new licence application from a conservation group was approved. NatureScot, which has approved the licence, said the decision marks the first ever conservation translocation of wildcats in the UK. The Scottish Government agency said it hopes that the project will help restore Scotland's critically endangered wildcat population. The Saving Wildcats Partnership, which applied for the licence in September last year, plans to release around 20 wildcats annually, with the first trial release planned for June. In considering the licence application, NatureScot assessed the proposed release sites as suitable for relocating wildcats from the project's breeding centre at the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland's Highland Wildlife Park. The agency, however, said that while the project will benefit the species, there are risks and challenges associated with relocating predators, and success will rely on the support of local communities. NatureScot's head of biodiversity, Dr. Catherine Lees, said habitat loss, persecution, and hybridisation with domestic cats has brought the Scottish wildcat population to the brink of extinction. The Saving Wildcats Partnership has been a lifeline for the species, and our decision to grant a translocation licence to allow wildcats to be released in the Highlands of Scotland marks a crucial point in the long journey towards conserving this iconic species. This journey is not without difficulty, and we know that there are more hurdles to overcome before we reach the point where we are ready to release the wildcats into carefully selected areas of the Cairngorms National Park. Once there, the wildcats will face further challenges, so it's crucial that the project continues to work with local communities, farmers, landowners, and cat owners to ensure that wildcats are given the best chance to survive and thrive. Dr. Helen Seng, the Saving Wildcats project lead and the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland head of conservation, said the animals will be monitored using GPS collars following their release. She said that the chosen site provides a suitable mix of habitats and potential prey for the species, adding, "It is fantastic to reach this milestone and to press ahead with planning for the trial wildcat releases in the Cairngorms over the summer." Saving Wildcats is one of the largest species conservation projects in Britain, and it is supported by the Royal Zoological Society of Scotland, NatureScot, Forestry and Land Scotland, and the Cairngorms National Park Authority, together with European partners Nordens Ark and the Junta de Andalucía. And that is all that we have for you this evening. In making these programmes, Broadcasting Scotland relies on the support of viewers and others who value our distinctive approach to news, current affairs and culture. Please help us to continue to make these programmes, to continue to develop the station, and to make new programmes for you. Our programmes will always be free to view, but if you can afford £5 per month, please consider becoming a Broadcasting Scotland supporter. We have set ourselves a target of raising £30,000 in order that we can pay the bills. To everyone who has donated and to everyone who has signed up to make a regular monthly payment as a Broadcasting Scotland supporter, thank you very much. There are other ways in which you can contribute to our work. If you would like to volunteer to work with Broadcasting Scotland, either behind the scenes or in front of the cameras, or in any other way that helps our work and promotes the station, then please visit our website at www.broadcastingscotland.scot and send us a message there. You can find us on Twitter at BroadcastScot. Please like and retweet us there. And you can also find us on Facebook by searching for Broadcasting Scotland. When you're watching us on YouTube, it would be great if you would like and subscribe to Broadcasting Scotland on that platform. Just click on the wee bell. We will be back on Sunday at 12 noon for the next edition of the Full Scottish, so please come back and join us then. Today in 1603, Queen Elizabeth I of England died. 2 days later, the news reached 36-year-old James VI in Edinburgh that he was now also King James I of England. He styled himself the King of Great Britain, and the crowns of Scotland were unified under the Stuart dynasty. I'd like to thank everyone who's been watching this evening. Please keep safe, keep warm, and I hope that you have a very peaceful weekend. Bye-bye.